Wach, guys. Zel Chaim. Chaim Ruch. Menachem Mendel, are we live?
Yes.
Okay, Agutwach. A few years ago, when I was a yeshiva student, me and a few other yeshiva students, we went over to the Pinya Korf, Langesund. The Pinya Korf, night before Yom Kippur. We asked Rabbi Pinya if he could lead a farbrengen for us. Rabbi Pinya said that there are some people who are very organized in their service of Hashem. They know what to do when. If you're very organized in service of Hashem, so he said, well, I don't know if there's such a concept of doing it for farbrengen the night before Yom Kippur, because he hasn't seen that by other older chassidim. He doesn't know about the concept of doing it for farbrengen the night before Yom Kippur. But he said that's only for people who are so organized, know exactly what to do when. But he said for people like us, he put us in the same caliber as himself because he's a very humble person. People like us, so then we could farbrengen the night before Yom Kippur as well. Opinion for me represents the entirety of the wisdom and the whimsy, the fire and the joy of what a chassid is. So I want to dedicate our story tonight to Rapinya, Fall Pinchas, Chayhudis, Shavarfu, Kreva Shlema, Chaim V'lach. Chazak Kazliner, Olav Shalom, used to say that just like it says in the Torah that the spices that the Kohen Gadol would offer for the incense was ground very fine a whole year, but right before Yom Kippur, day before Yom Kippur, they grinded it again, made it even more, grinded it again. So Chazak Kazlin used to say, day before Yom Kippur, you gotta grind it again, which means you have to somehow bring into yourself more humility than you do ordinarily. Day before Yom Kippur, Shechkan Yafa, you gotta introduce a little more humility than you ordinarily do. So in that spirit, I think it's very apropos to share a story about the concept of davening for someone else. I haven't seen this written in chassidus. I don't know if this is true or not true, but I just personally feel a lot of times it's easier to pray for someone else than to pray for myself. Pray for myself, I start thinking, do I want this? Do I want that? Do I deserve this? Do I deserve that? I pray for someone else who needs the same thing. It's a lot easier for me to concentrate. That's just me personally. And the Gemara says, if you pray for someone else for the same thing that you need yourself, Hashem will answer you first. So it's worth it. And the Rebbe actually once said that even if you pray for someone else, because you want God to answer you first, it still works. So I'll share with you an incredible, beautiful story. Shechkan Yafa, the idea of being grinded, and being humble and thinking about other people as the night before Yom Kippur. I'll share with you an incredible story. This story is recounted by the previous Rebbe in the great detail. I'm sharing with you the stories related with all the details of the times and the months and the years. And I'm going to share with you the entire story. It's actually a long story, not the entire story, but a summary of the story. This is a story of the birth of the chassid whose name was Shlomo Bashe. As far as I know, please someone post it on the chat if you know differently. As far as I know, for some reason, although it's a beautiful story, it's not printed in English as far as I know. If you know differently, please post on the chat. This Shlomo Bashe, his father lived in the town of Denberg. His name was Gedalia Baruch. Gedalia Baruch lived together with his wife Bashe. He was a shoemaker, and she used to do like segules. She used to do like different spiritual remedies to heal people. She used to, have the different medical things, different schools, different spiritual remedies for various issues that people would have. Especially, she would help people who had just given birth, and poor people, very generous, kind people, and they were chassidim of the Baal Shem Tov. So Rav Gedalia Baruch was living in the city of Denberg for a few years, and he had invited to the town other Hasidim of the Baal Shem Tov. At that time, the Hasidim of the Baal Shem Tov would dress like they were, even though they were extraordinary Torah giants, they would dress like very simple people, very down-to-earth people, and this town of Denberg was a town of farmers. And Rabbi Daya Baruch would have all these people who would come to visit him and visit the town to waken up the hearts of people to serve Hashem. These students of the Baal Shem Tov would dress like simple people, and they would share inspiring thoughts. At that time, there was like a class divide between the knowledgeable Torah scholars and regular people. And although most people weren't so knowledgeable, they felt ostracized and not really part of the Jewish people. And these travelers would come by and they would really raise their spirits. There was one time that one of these travelers came by, and at the same time that a traveling mochiach came by. A mochiach was someone who would travel to rebuke people, to tell people if they don't change their ways, they're going to get cursed. And there was one specific Jew named Reb Tebele the grocer, actually Reb Tebele Bal HaYerakos, Reb Tebele who sold vegetables. And Reb Tebele would lay it on thick, or actually that's the wrong expression. He would really find fault in people and rebuke them and tell them if they don't change their ways, what kind of terrible things would happen to them. So he arrived the same Shabbos as one of the friends of Rabbi Daya Baruch, and people had heard Reb Tebele, he really cursed them and rebuked them and found fault in them. He really crushed them. And the other visitor from the Baal Shem Tov, a whole different energy. He spoke about how Jewish people are kind and merciful and generous, and he really raised everyone's spirits. And everyone was able to see the marked difference between the path of the students of the Baal Shem Tov and the Reb Tebele. They didn't actually know about the Baal Shem Tov yet. That happened later. In the year Tov Tzadik Ches, on Shavuos, after Rabbi Daya Baruch had been living in Denberg for 4 years, before the Torah reading, in Tov Tzadik Ches in that year, on Shavuos, the day that God gave us the Torah, he made an announcement in the synagogue, an announcement that really shook people up. He says, this is the day, and every year that we celebrate the day that God gave us the Torah, we have to really have thanks to God, the incredible merit that we have, that God decided to give us the Torah. And then he said, we also have to think about the incredible merit our generation has, that we have someone who God has chosen to give the Jewish people a path in serving God with the love of Israel, with good character, the Baal Shem Tov. And he spoke about the miracles and wonders of the Baal Shem Tov, and how the Baal Shem Tov had introduced a new path in serving God. And what he said made a huge impression on all the listeners, so much so, he used to daven in a shul called the Chevra Kadisha Shul. There were 3 other shuls in Denberg, and he was invited to the 2 other shuls, actually to all 3 shuls, to share what he had said to them. And throughout Shavuos, he was talking about the incredible miracles of the Baal Shem Tov, and how Hashem has given us, in every generation, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses got the Torah at Mount Sinai, and Moses gave the Torah to Joshua. And in every generation, the Torah is transferred to a tzaddik, to a leader, and how important it is to have faith in the tzaddik of the generation. That's what he said. And although Rabbi Daya Baruch up to this point was known to be a humble person and not so knowledgeable, but after this point, he started to share his incredible knowledge in Torah and Gemara, and there began a certain energy of faith in the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, and people really became intrigued by this Gedaya Baruch, and there were groups of people that were, to a certain extent, followers, if you will. They had never visited the Baal Shem Tov, but a certain kind of connection they had already to the Baal Shem Tov at that time. So, in the year Tammuz, in Tavkuf Aleph, 3 years later, in Tammuz, Gedaya Baruch arranged a trip to the Baal Shem Tov in the summertime. He took a group of people from the town, and they stayed in Mezhebush, in the town of the Baal Shem Tov. They left Denberg, they went to Mezhebush, and they stayed there till Sukkot. They stayed there for 3 months, and when they came back, they brought this whole new energy to the town, whole new happiness and energy. And after they came back, there was a lot of things changed. For example, In every synagogue, they would set aside time in the synagogue to talk about the miracles of the Baal Shem Tov. It became like a part of everyone's day to think about and talk about the miracles of Baal Shem Tov. They really were touched by this trip, and it started to spread. Now, in this town, there was, especially, of course, this touched people who had a hard, lives and were bitter. Hearing about this miracle worker who could make blessings and give blessings that really made changes really hit home. So at this point, there was in Denmark another man named Moshe Chaim. Moshe Chaim was married to his wife Miriam, and she and Moshe Chaim unfortunately weren't blessed with children. In the month of Teves, in Tov Kuf Dalet, Rabbi Moshe Chaim was talking to a friend of his about the Baal Shem Tov, about the miracles of Baal Shem Tov. His friend had told him a story how this person needed bracha for children, and Baal Shem Tov had advised him to give tzedakah to ransom someone who had been captured, which was very common at that time because all of the Polish landowners would imprison any of those Jews who couldn't pay their rent. So the Baal Shem Tov had told this guy who needed a bracha for children to redeem this. To redeem this family. And as soon as they did this, they were blessed with children. Moshe Chaim was listening to this. He goes home to his wife, Miriam. He tells her, what, I want to visit the Baal Shem Tov. I hear all these stories, and I think we should do this. We should go to the Baal Shem Tov. His wife is ecstatic. His wife actually worked together. Oops, my phone just died, I think. Baruch Hashem. I'll restart in a second.
Again, I hear you, Rabbi Levin.
I think he's gonna just plug in his phone and start it again.
I believe Rabbi Levin's phone lost battery, so I think Rabbi Levin's going to charge it and log back in.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. We continue the story. Sorry about that. Okay. Continuing, a little technical difficulties. My phone just died. Baruch Hashem, it's now at Chias HaMesim. Continuing on where we were. So we were up to the part where this Reb Moshe Chaim was telling his wife that he thinks it'd be a good idea for them to go visit the Baal Shem Tov, and she was very happy because she worked for Bashe. She worked for Bashe, the wife of the chassid, the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Baruch. And she had heard lots of stories about the Baal Shem Tov. She had heard so many things about the Baal Shem Tov. Sure that going to Baal Shem Tov would be a great idea. And she told her husband how she wanted to mention to him that they should go to Baal Shem Tov, but she never mentioned it till then because she thought that it wouldn't be accepted, he wouldn't want to go, and she's so happy and she would love to go to Baal Shem Tov. The problem was, this Rabbi Baruch, he had never ever left the city of Denver in his life. He was terrified of traveling. So he didn't think it'd be a good idea to travel because he just never traveled, even though he wanted to travel, but he just felt he couldn't travel. And time went on. One day, Rabbi Baruch's wife, Bashe, is working together with Miriam. They visit this woman who was very poor, and they help her. And on the way back, Bashe tells Miriam, I feel so bad for this lady. Her children don't have shoes, her children don't have clothing, they're hungry and they're thirsty and they're bare, and I really wish we could help them. So she told this to Miriam. Miriam says, God's ways are always just, but I'm actually thinking about this woman who's so lucky she is. She has 12 children. I don't have any children. So Bashe says, why don't you go to the Baal Shem Tov? And she says, I would love to go to the Baal Shem Tov. My husband's just afraid to travel. I don't know what to do. Shortly afterwards, it was Pesach, and her husband, Moshe Levin, heard that there was going to be a group going after Pesach to the Baal Shem Tov. He told his wife, you know what, I'm going to go with the group. Rabbi Baruch is leading another group to visit Baal Shem Tov. I'm going to go with him. And sure enough, in the beginning of Iyar, he set out, together with his wife, on this visit to Baal Shem Tov. They came to Baal Shem Tov. And when his wife, Moshe Chaim and Miriam, together entered the Baal Shem Tov's room to ask for a blessing for children, Baal Shem Tov did not respond. They asked for a blessing a second time. He didn't respond. They visited him 3 times. At 3 different times they visited Baal Shem Tov, and they asked for a blessing for children. Baal Shem Tov did not answer. And they were so upset that the Moshe Chaim's wife, Miriam, fainted. And when she woke up, she just burst out from her heart crying. And Rabbi Baruch, knowing the way of the Baal Shem Tov, knowing how much love Baal Shem Tov has for everyone, and knowing how much he cares about everyone, he understood this is a serious situation. And this can't be rectified in a regular way. And he asked other followers, chassidim of the Baal Shem Tov, he was one of the first chassidim of the Baal Shem Tov, he asked his colleagues what could be done. They advised him that they should get together and they should fast for 3 consecutive days and nights. For 72 hours, they should fast for 3 days and nights, and they should pray on behalf of Rabbi Baruch, on behalf of Moshe Chaim and Miriam. They shouldn't, and they did it with Avos Yisrael, which, by the way, this town, Baruch Hashem, Los Angeles, is really, people do this all the time. I really noticed this, and it's very, very inspiring. People always share, this person going to a surgery, this person needs a blessing, please pray for this person. I think Los Angeles, Baruch Hashem, excels in this idea of davening and asking Hashem to have mercy on other person. It's really a special thing. The previous Rebbe said that when you daven for someone else and you ask Hashem to have mercy on that person, God accepts this like the prayers of the greatest prayer in history, the prayers of Rabbi Shmuel, Kohen Gadol, Rabbi Shmuel, the high priest, in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. So getting back to the story. So they're praying for 3 days and nights. They decided they're not going to speak at all, any mundane things for 72 hours. They're just going to pray for them for 72 hours. They're not going to eat or drink. At the end of 72 hours, at the end of the fast, a messenger arrives from the Baal Shem Tov. The messenger says, the Baal Shem Tov invites all of you to come to a special, they didn't tell anybody what they were doing, by the way. This was a private thing. They did this themselves. They didn't tell the Baal Shem Tov. They just did this by themselves. But a messenger came from Baal Shem Tov. The messenger said, Baal Shem Tov wants you all to come to a special su'uda, special meal, special party. So they ask, what's the party about? It's not Shabbos, it's not Yom Tov, it's not Rosh Chodesh. Why is there a party? The messenger says, I don't know. Just come to the party. So all of them go to the Baal Shem Tov, to this party, to this Uda. And at this party, Baal Shem Tov is talking about the incredible virtue of people who pray for others, people who turn to God to ask Hashem to have rahmanas, to have mercy on other people. Baal Shem is talking about this, and they realize Baal Shem is talking about them. They realize this good stuff is happening. There must be God has heard their prayers, and God has sent a message to Baal Shem about what they were doing. And they're very happy. And the Gedaya Baruch encourages Rabbi Moshe Chaim and his wife to come over to Baal Shem Tov. They go over to Baal Shem Tov at this occasion, at this festive meal, and Baal Shem Tov gives them a bracha that they should have a child. And they're very happy. Everyone's happy. And when the group traveled back to Denmark after this pilgrimage to Baal Shem Tov, they went with joyous hearts, light on their feet, with happiness, with joy, they knew good news was happening. And sure enough, on the second day of Iyar, the following year, sure enough, on that exact day that they had left to go to the Baal Shem Tov, and that exact day, Reb Chaim Moshe and Miriam were blessed with a child. Interesting thing that, to me, the child was born on the second day of Iyar. The second day of Iyar is a special day in our calendar. It's the day that the Rebbe Marash was born. And we know that Rebbe Marash was famous for the teaching of going straight over, going beyond all limitations. The Rebbe actually once said that regarding Bais Bezalel, regarding love of our fellow Jew, someone who was previously doing the opposite, but the power of the second day of Iyar, power of the Chassidus is to make it 180, suddenly act in a way of kindness and love and friendship to those people that you were previously doing the opposite. Anyways, get back to the story. Baruch Hashem, the baby,
Don't worry about
the second day of Iyar,
it.
and the exact same day, Bashe, the wife of Gedaya Baruch, also had a child. And her child's name was Yocheved. And Baruch Hashem, Shlomo grows up, and he marries Yocheved. Shlomo marries Yocheved, and he was called Reb Shlomo Bashe. He was called Reb Shlomo, the one who belongs to his mother-in-law. Just because she was such a righteous, wonderful person, so they called him a Shlomo Bashe. So the point of the story is how incredible it is to daven and pray for someone else. And Yom Kippur is coming. We're asking Hashem for all good things. We should also think about all those in our life who need the same blessings that we do, and ask Hashem on behalf of someone else, and Hashem will answer you first. Not only will Hashem also answer you. You ask Hashem for someone else, Torah says God answers you first. May Hashem help all of us and each of us have a chassidus marchim ateva, Shana Tov Mesuka. We should celebrate with Bais Bezalel, Yerushalayim, with Mashiach Tzidkenu, God Mamish.
Amen.
Any questions, comments? Okay. A good vach, a good yontiv David, a good vach, a good yontiv Yehuda, good vach Charlie, good vach Yosef, good vach Beryl, marchim ateva, Shana Tov Mesuka, Tevanir Vanigel Mashiach now.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.